last big takeaway is Gino's a quitter. I did quit. That's all.
Hey, Gino, really good to have you on the show today, and just kind of wanted to, talk to you about multifamily, talk about what you and Jake are doing over there, and just kind of get a little bit about, how you're operating in this market and things of that nature. So, but before we get into all of that, let's talk about you and who you are, how you got to where you're at today, what made you go to multifamily. Kind of tell us a little bit about your history.
Dax, when I met you about a year ago, you're a little over a year and a half ago, I recognized that I was a quitter. I recognized that someone had a lot more children than I did. And I had 6 kids, and I'm like, I thought I was pretty accomplished. And here comes Dax, and there's 9 children, right? You got 9?
9, yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I'm like,
9.
I'm like Julia, my wife, I said, I'm a quitter. We stopped at 6. And
Wow, we have 20 between us. That is amazing.
Between us 3, we have 20 kids, and I
that.
have almost half of them. I'm just saying.
Let's start a small work at least.
Wow. So Dax, what I would say, I mean, all kidding aside, if you look at your family, you look at my family, I always equated multifamily to like almost like raising a large family. On that first child that we had, I didn't know what I was doing. You got your first kid, you're overwhelmed. You don't know what you're doing. It's like your first deal. You close your first deal on Women of Prayer. You probably overpay. You're stressed out, but you got over the finish line. The second kid, wow, okay, I figured I've got one deal. There's my second deal. The second child, husband, wife, you can figure it out because you got one each. The third kid is like, wow, I'm getting a little overwhelmed, but I've done it twice, and it's starting to make sense now. The fourth kid is like, this is getting to be a little bit of fun. I'm understanding this kind of gig. I know how to make money in this multifamily. And my children, they're pretty good. I haven't killed them. I haven't damaged them yet. And then the fifth kid comes, and it's like, this is getting to be real fun. And by the sixth child, it's like, you're chugging along. You want to keep having these babies. And multifamily is very similar to raising a family. You have to nurture your children. You can't just buy these deals and walk away from the deals. You have to buy right, finance right, and manage right. And that's just how it is with the family. The only difference is multifamily puts money in your pocket. Kids take money out of your pocket until they get to be of age where they can go out to work and they can start putting some more money into your pocket. But all kidding aside, for me, starting out, I was the pizza guy. Jake was the drug rep. And I owned a restaurant for over 20 years in New York, a great little place, Dax. And I got to 2008 and the Great Recession came and my father just passed away. And I'm like, I need to do something different. I've got 4 kids at the time. I'm not making enough money. And I said to my wife, how about this multifamily thing? I'd invested in a couple other assets that went really bad. I went all in on multifamily. And thankfully, the Lord sent Jake to me. I met him in the restaurant in 2009. He was a pharmaceutical rep doing taking food out of the restaurant, catering orders, and bringing them to doctors' offices. Young guy, scrappy guy, hard worker. So I'm like, this is the guy that I want to partner with in multifamily. Fortunately for me, in 2011, he moved from New York to Knoxville, Tennessee. We partnered up, got together in 2013, and we bought our first deal then. It took us 18 months to get the first deal, 25 units. But then from 25 units, the next deal was 36 units. And 6 months after that, it was 136 units. Then back down to 22. And on average, since 2013, we've done between 2 and 3 deals a year. We're currently at 1,600 units. The portfolio, we've only syndicated 3 deals. So the rest of that portfolio is me, Jake, and a partner, Mike. We just kept refining the deals, refining the money, not partying, but going out and putting the money into the next deal. And with the mindset of not knowing what an exit strategy was in the beginning of our investing, but now the exit strategy is to buy right, sit tight, and buy deals that we can hold for the long term. That's our strategy. It's worked for us. Now, listen, we've got a 4-unit on the contract that we're selling. So it's not like we're going to hold all of our assets long term. There's some assets that we want to recycle out of, but we always bought great assets. We always bought great deals. We weren't the ones that were like, get the right, do a deal. We are deal junkies, but I learned early on, no deal is better than a bad deal. And I did a couple of really bad deals before I got together with Jake. The dude is lucky. He met me. I had all the pain, and we haven't really done a bad deal together because I learned all of those mistakes, trials and tribulations, going through the mentorships, doing bad deals, suffering, and saying to myself, I'd rather sit on the sidelines than go out and force a deal that doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. So you kind of hit on it a little bit. You do different size deals. You have some that are larger, but a lot that are smaller. And to tell us, like a lot of folks that we deal with, with the market the way it is, some of the larger deals aren't performing as well. And tell us about your deals. Some of the smaller deals that you're in. How's that an advantage to you?
So the first thing I think that I'd like to share is when you're going to buy a multifamily or any kind of investment, what are your goals? I mean, what are your investing goals? For me and Jake, we really want to create a company on the small giants mindset. If anyone's read the book Small Giants by Bo Burlingham, if you haven't, go out there, read it. I don't need to be the next REIT. I don't need to own 17,000 units. I'm working on a profit per unit. That's what our metric is. We want to get really profitable deals. We're vertically integrated. So over the last few years, it's been really hard to scale because it's hard to find labor. It's hard to find materials and supplies. So we've been really selective with our deals. So the first thing you need to do as an investor, what's your buy rate criteria? What can you buy? If you can only afford to buy 10 to 50 units, but you're looking at 300 unit deals, you're wasting your time. The next thing is pick a market. When you're first starting out, select one market, become an expert in that market. And then the next thing is start trying to fill out your buy rate criteria. Age of the asset, vintage, what's the median income of the area, unit mix, what kind of amenities. Get really crystal clear because we don't lack motivation. We always lack the clarity that gives us the motivation. So if you can figure out what your buy rate criteria is, that will help you buy these assets. And for us, it's changed over the years because the market cycle has changed. When we started earlier on, the assets in the C class were really at a discount. So those were the value adds. But as the markets accelerated and gone into the seller's market, those C properties have gotten more expensive. So we've transitioned into newer assets. The thing that I love about the smaller assets, the 20 to 50 units in the last couple of years, you have the mom and pop buyers. They think it's too expensive. They can't get into it. And the private equities, they don't want to look at anything less than 100 units. So there's been a niche over the last couple of years. And I think Dax and Daniel, over the last 10 years, there's been that sweet spot. But I think it's been really more pronounced over the last couple of years because it's really hard to manage a 20 to 30 unit deal when you're out of market and out of state. Third party has problems with that. But with us, we can take that 20 units and we can wrap it into a 50 unit and an 80 unit and make 200 units out of those small deals and get economies of scale that way. That's what's benefited us. And that's what's helped us. But what I want the listeners to understand is don't wait. You need to start doing deals today. And I always think about it as an imaginary conveyor belt. Think of a conveyor belt in front of you. When you first start out, you start buying deals. You may buy a single family, you may buy a duplex, a triplex. In real estate, you don't make money when you buy. You make money when you sell or you refi. You're crystallizing the equity. Yep. So if you have a duplex or a quad, we just put a 4 unit on market, on contract. We're selling it for $787,000. We paid a little over $400 for it 2 years ago. That's a 4 unit. We're not going to keep it because it's hard to manage, but we've crystallized $300,000 of equity. That equity is going to go right into our next deal. And what is it? We put it on the conveyor belt 2 years ago when there were no other deals out there. We paid about $100 a door for it. It was a little expensive, but the unit mix was great. The area was great. We let real estate do its thing. We fixed it up. We got the NOI up, and we were able to get an excellent price today. Now, if that deal made more sense or there was more scale to it, we would keep it. But you know what? We put it on the conveyor belt. Let time do its magic. Get to work on managing the properties. And then at the end of that cycle, you either sell it if it doesn't fit your exit strategy or your business plan, or refi that deal, crystallize it, and go forward. So the only difference I would say is on the smaller deals, it's just as much work as doing a larger deal. If you've got a 40 unit deal and you have a 140 unit deal, it's more or less the same amount of work. But with the 140 unit deal, as an entrepreneur, the more residents you can serve, the more investors you can serve, the more money you can make. But I'm not going to force 140 unit deal because that's what everyone tells me to do and overpay when I can still make a ton of money on a 40 unit deal and go after that 40 unit deal. So for us, within 3 hours in Knoxville, we know we can take down smaller deals because we can just roll it into our portfolio. And if you're out there listening and saying, well, you know what, scalability, economies of scale, it doesn't make sense for me to start with a 10 unit. Let me tell you something. It does, because if you haven't done a deal yet and you do a 10 unit, all of a sudden, Uncle Vinny's going to go, oh, wow, Gino just did a deal. I can talk to Uncle Vinny about the deal. I can talk to a broker about the deal. Hey, Dax, by the way, I got a deal. You want to partner up with me? That's what happens. You start getting more momentum and you start getting traction with those deals. So don't be held back by saying, oh, this deal is too small, because I think your behaviors are belief driven. If you're saying to yourself, I need to do a big deal, but I can't do a big deal, it's subconsciously you're not going to do it. So get off your ass, look at the smaller deals. Don't be afraid to do smaller deals and get in the game. And once you're in the game, all of a sudden the opportunities start flying at you because your name starts getting out there. Wow, Gino closed a 10 unit. All of a sudden that broker knows, the title company knows, the the agent knows, and all of a sudden the property management companies know. So get out there and start making some noise.
Gino, I think you hit the nail on the head, because people are afraid to get off the seat and move, because they're like, well, that doesn't make sense unless I can do 100 units, 200 units, or whatnot. But as you said before, you've only syndicated a couple of deals in all of your portfolio, and you probably have more of the market share or more of the profitability on those jobs than anybody on a 100 unit would. And so you're making more money on smaller deals, and people just can't see past that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you've done very well, and you and Jake both have done very well on teaching people, hey, listen, a 10 unit deal can be as much or better profit than a 200 unit deal, because you're only going to own so much of that deal, right?
Yes.
And so
yes.
that makes your life so much easier and better. Maybe it's harder to manage. Maybe you have to have different property management. Maybe you have to have different things here and there. But the ultimate end goal is for profitability, right?
Yes.
And so if profitability is your end game, which in this industry it is, we all know that. If that's the end game, then how are you going to be more profitable? Is it to own a smaller percentage of a 200 unit, or is it to own a larger percentage of a 4, 8, 10, 12, 30 unit?
So let me push back on that. Hold on one second. Let me push back on that. Why can't we have both? Why can't you do both of those? There's no reason you can't do both, because a lot of our students and our coaches start out with syndication. They love it. They fall in the dream. And then all of a sudden they're like, I'm doing all this work and I got to exit after 3 to 5 years and I make a great paycheck. But if I go buy a 20 unit and a 30 unit and JV that, I can make just as much money doing that. So let's learn all of the strategies. And right now, syndication worked over the last 5 years. It may not work as well going forward. I'm telling you, seller financing, I had a student that just closed on a full seller finance 10 unit deal. No money out of his pocket. Okay, it's only 10 units, but you're not putting any money down. 30-year AM, 3.5%. You think the guy's going to make some bucks? Even if he does $200 profit per unit on that deal, it's only $2,000 a month. But that's his very first deal, and he hasn't taken any money out. And then you cost seg that deal at $1.3 million. Just the tax benefits alone from that gets him in. Oh, it's only a 10 unit, but you know what? He cut his teeth. All of a sudden, he's in the game. He's motivated. He's inspired. And that next deal he's going to be looking at is going to be 20 to 30 units. And then the next deal is 30 to 50. And you're going to continue to scale that way. I think that's the progression. And you're looking at real estate as a business. You want to scale and cycle through your portfolio. It's okay to start with 10. In 5 years, if you'd started with 10, you're going to be up to 100, 150. And then when you see a 30 unit, I'll give you a quick example. We closed a deal 2 years ago. It was a 40-unit deal in Knoxville, 2005 build, only 40 units, built in 05, concrete between the levels, built by a contractor, amazing job, 80 a door. The rents were $700. We just got that property appraised and valued 2 months ago. We refied it out. It was worth over 160 a door. We doubled the value of that property in 2 years. It's only 40 units, right? Only 40 units. But that 140 unit deal is life-changing to anybody. We refied all of our money out, and on average is printing between $250 and $300 per month in profit per unit. That's $12,000 a month on average, between $10 and $12,000 a month from one crappy 40 unit deal that we can hold for the next 20 years because it's an 05 build. It's a great build in a great location that you're able to hold for the next 10 to 15 years without worrying about all that CapEx. So let me tell you, don't worry about the size of the deal. Worry about the quality of the deal and how it fits your investment goals.
And that's perfect, because I'm dealing with a lot of my customers on the construction side, right? Or where we're at, we deal with 100 units or more, right? So that's kind of our sweet spot and where we're at. And it's great. It works great for us, and working with your students and whatnot on some of those projects, it's been good. but I'm looking at the market today and seeing how it's changing and thinking, man, Jake and Gino have this have this niche because not many people are teaching. Some are. I'm not saying not anybody's teaching, but not everybody's teaching. And you need to really focus and highlight on these 30 to 80 unit properties because that really you can find owner financing. You can do assumption loans a little bit easier than you can on some of the larger deals, and there's a lot more profit to be made in these. And
Mm-hmm.
so they're not my customers today. However, I'm sending them your way, going, look, you need to talk to Jake and Gino because they know what they're talking about, and I don't know this market at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, and what I've looked at you guys is just brilliant for how you're approaching that market and how you're really attacking that that asset class much different than most anybody else in the multifamily world. So what I want to ask in this is, kind of where the market is today and what we're seeing with lending, what we're seeing with insurance and all the other what I'm going to call negatives in this world. I, I don't feel like you're facing the same challenges on a same level as some of these other deals. So I kind of want to talk to you about that. Kind of what are you experiencing in multifamily and how is it changing how you're teaching your students today versus what you were teaching a couple years ago? Is it changing your market and what you're teaching?
It's a great question. What I would say is it's buy right, manage right, and finance right. We like long-term fixed rate financing. We're not the bridge type folks who go out there and try to get a bridge loan for 24 months, expensive financing, and then all of a sudden the Fed decides to raise rates at an incredible rate and get caught at that. There's a lot of risk in that. First of all, you're overpaying. Number one, you're paying for potential profit that you haven't realized, which is fine. But then you have a timeline. Whenever you put yourself under a timeline and the uncertainty of the future with interest rates, our next loan due in our portfolio of 1,700 units is due August 2027. So we've got a few years out before anything even resets. So we want to take the long-term fixed rate financing off the table. We've used bridge financing, but we've used loan to cost with community banks and credit unions. So it gives you at least a 5-year run, because what happens is when you're underwriting these things a year and a half ago at 3.5%, thinking that, hey, I'm going to be out in 2 years, it's 5, maybe 6 worst case scenario. And now all of a sudden these loans are at 9%. You're dead in the water, number one. Number two, nobody foresaw insurance doubling in Houston. Nobody saw labor doubling in Houston. And I'm just picking on Houston, but all these other cities, insurance, taxes. You can be a great operator like the rock star Robert Martinez, like the guy. It sort of wasn't his fault. I mean, you can be a great operator, still working really well, and these expenses come out of nowhere. And on top of that, your debt service just gets clobbered because you've never seen the Fed do something like this in 18 months, raise rates that quickly and shock the system. It sort of isn't fair, but life ain't fair. And what you need to do is you need to learn how to finance right, take that risk off the table and pass on those deals. We saw some deals that were like, you know what, we should buy the deal, but if we only have 24 months to turn 196 units, double the rents during COVID, when you can't get supplies and you can't get materials and you can't get labor, there's a lot of risk in that business plan. And then unfortunately, what is it? Is it to sell on the back end, do all that work and try to flip it on the back end? That's not what we want to do. We've created all this equity. We want to keep the equity ourselves if we're buying a great deal like that. So what I would say to people, be careful with the finance right. And it hasn't been overlooked, but the positive news, Dax, is that brokers are calling us back. Brokers have deals now. There hasn't been that many transactions over the last 8 months because there's a lag. Because what happens is sellers don't understand that the cost of capital has doubled and maybe even tripled in some instances. That's the first thing. So when that happens, all of a sudden prices have to come down. And then the residential side, you've seen it come down a little bit, but residential is its own beast because you have a supply demand issue there. And you have so many homes. Half the homes in the US don't have a mortgage, number one, so they don't have to be sold. The other ones have such sub 3%. I mean, how many of those have such cheap mortgages? So they're not going out selling and they can find a deal. But in multifamily, this tsunami the next couple of months of these loans coming due, there's a lot of opportunity. You have a lot of community banks calling loans because all of a sudden their interest rates went above prime and all of a sudden they're calling these loans. So if you're getting a loan called, you've got to sell. You become a motivated seller. So just be careful. There's going to be a lot of opportunity in the next 12 months. That's why people are running to the exits like they were in 08 and 09. When they run to the exits, that means you have to stay. One last thing. Warren Buffett is big on the home builders. If Warren Buffett is looking at home builders long-term, I think long-term for real estate, it's a basic human need. I think if you buy these assets with the intention of investing long-term and, looking at these assets long-term, because you can always buy real estate. You can't always sell real estate. You can always buy it. You just have to learn how to buy it. But if you caught in a down market and you're trying to sell it, it's going to be very difficult, like we're going to see in the next 6 to 12 months. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question at least?
No, yeah, 100%. The only thing I would say is, because I'm going to toot my own horn, we didn't have, as Heritage, we didn't have supply issues, because we buy so much that, we take care of our vendors, they take care of us, and maybe
That's
we had
awesome.
first right of refusal of things. So, if you are looking for, for the product or for the contractor or for the GC, look for the people that have the relationships that can help you succeed.
Yes.
Don't look for chucking a truck. Yes, it may be more expensive up front. However, it's going to be a cost savings on the back end, because you're going to have your units ready sooner so that you have them available to rent. So you're not going to have vacant units for longer. So I do toot my own horn on that, because that has been part of our success and why people have come to us is, hey, listen, I've been trying to turn, these 12 units for 3 months and I can't get them done. And because of product, I'm like, I don't have that issue. Let me throw some product your way and I'll get these done for you. So it all depends on who you're going to choose to do the product to be able to be successful. So not saying you have to use a GC when you're using that, or not saying I'm willing to do, that 10 unit. All I'm saying is, if you're going to do that, choose your contractors correctly to make sure that they are in line with what you're trying to accomplish. And if they're in line with that and they have the relationships, you're going to be as successful as they are. So I do want to say that. So anyway, sorry, Dan, to jump in on you, but I needed to say that for me.
So the Knoxville market earlier, and Dax and I, we've been there. I think we could both say we love Knoxville. Yeah. It's an awesome town. It's an awesome market. And we got to tour a couple of y'all's properties there, and they were great properties. I think we looked at maybe 3 of your properties there in Knoxville.
Yes.
4.
Yes.
Yeah, and they were awesome properties, all different size properties that we checked out while we were there, and we loved what we saw there. But is Knoxville, is that the only market you guys operate in, or are there other markets that you like? If so, like, which markets do you lean towards and why?
Great question. For us, we're vertically integrated. So within 3 hours of Knoxville, we've got deals. We've had deals in Louisville, Kentucky, 2 syndications we sold in the last 2 years. We've got a deal in Lexington, Kentucky. We're in Eastern Tennessee. We're looking at Johnson City. We're looking at Chattanooga, anything within the 3-hour radius of Knoxville. Now, the caveat to the small deals, if we're going to go into a new market that's 2 or 3 hours away, it's going to be challenging for us to buy a 10-unit property there. We'd like to get some kind of scale in that first deal in that market, because we want to bring, property management on site. So for us to go to, let's say, Nashville for a 10-unit, it may be a little challenging because we're vertically integrated and we have a team set up. So we'd want some scale. But I think if anybody's looking for a market in multifamily, Dax, and, Dan, this, you need jobs, you need population growth. That's what you need. Now, if you're in a market that doesn't have that, but it's your backyard, there may be risk, because all of a sudden what you're doing is you're just selling space. You're trying to rent it. And if your demographic is leaving that market, if you're losing people in that market, you're going to have less demand for your product. So just be aware of that. If you're losing jobs in that market, be aware of that. So there's so many great markets in the Southeast. Jake calls it the SEC, the Southeast Conference. You can come down here. You have everyone coming down. Listen, California is moving to Tennessee over the last 2 years. When did that ever happen in the history of the United States? It never, ever happened. And it's happening now. They're moving to Florida. They're moving to North Carolina. And the same thing with New York. New York is migrating down to the South because of the quality of the living, the cost of the living, the taxes, the weather. There's so many benefits to it. And the jobs. You know, years ago, I don't want to say that the South was less educated as far as college educated people, but now there's so many more people that have come down here with college education. And because what employers want, employers want, you know, workers who are skilled. You're looking at North Carolina, you're looking at all these different cities like Austin that are having tech booms. These employees are really skilled and they're really, you know, college educated. And that's what's been going on over the last 10 years. And you're getting this migration down here where these cities are having these major booms of employment and population, and multifamily can't keep up with it. That's why rents have gone to the roof. And you see Knoxville, you had Nashville, everyone's migrating east because Knoxville's cheaper. And now Knoxville market is getting, you know, that swell from Nashville, and they continue migrating east towards the state. So for us, look down in the Southeast. I mean, if you can invest down here, whether it's North Carolina market, you're looking at Tennessee, you're looking at South Carolina, Florida may be a challenge, Dax, because of because the insurance. That's one of the issues that I see in Florida. Yeah. But still, if it's your backyard, don't run away from it. Just understand that with your underwriting deals, go to an insurance broker, plug in the actual multifamily insurance number of what that looks like for that market, and then you'll be okay. And understand that that's going to be a big line item going forward. That insurance for a lot of markets that are coastal is going to be a big number for people.
Yeah, if you know the parameters, if you know your box you're dealing with, you can underwrite towards that box, right? And so that's what some people, unfortunately, right, with the market the way it is today, they had a box that they were operating in, and then the box changed midstream, right? So insurance rates, you know, interest rates, insurance rates, all that stuff kind of changed in the middle of their deal, and they're like, whoa, wait, I wasn't quite prepared for all of this change at one time. And so that's kind of why the market has changed the way it is. So totally agree with that. By the way, in Chattanooga, I've got to say this, Main Street Meats, if you haven't been there, it's the absolute best place to go eat. If you haven't been there, you got to go eat there. They slaughter in the back and they serve the meat in the front. It's the best place to go. Probably, I mean, I eat a lot of fine dining steak options, but that's actually one of my favorite places to go if I ever go there. So kudos to those guys. They're doing it right. So, but anyway, I mean, as far as multifamily goes, you know, Southeast has always been kind of our wheelhouse where we played in. I mean, we're nationwide. You know, I'm flying up to Cleveland next week. I've done work in Des Moines, you know, Kansas, all that stuff. But you know, typically we deal with Texas, Oklahoma, Carolinas, Florida, everything in between. And we see all these markets. We see the insurance rates and how they've changed along the coastal areas and how it's, you know, just decimated some of those properties in because they weren't underwritten that way in the way that they've changed, right? So a couple of years ago, you did a deal and you're like, okay, well, it's 3% today. You know, underwrite it for 5% on interest rate because it may go up, and now it's sitting at 9 or 10 or whatever it is. And you're like, nobody could have planned for that. And so it's not necessarily a bad operator if the property is not functioning today or not operating properly today. It's the market and what it is. So how do you regroup as us as entrepreneurs? We talk about this all the time. You know, how do we regroup and change the plan, because this is what we planned for, right? And so I think that's kind of where we're at today in the multifamily market, and it's challenging, but we all like challenges as far as the entrepreneurs go. So anyway, so wanted to put that out there to everybody as well. So I always like to ask funny stories because we've been in this business and goodness gracious, there's tons of funny stories. I can talk about the due diligence side, some of the stuff we've seen. I can talk about the operational side, some of the stuff we've seen. But I like to have everybody that's on here just tell me a funny story of something that happened to you that's like, oh my goodness, you won't believe this story. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell it from your perspective. What are some funny stories that you have, or the funny story that you have that you want to share with us?
I don't know if they're funny. They're painful to me. I mean, like, the very first deal that Jake and I did, I remember him telling me, went door knocking because it was a 25-unit deal. There was no due diligence, mom and pop owner, and there were weekly renters. So we want to go and verify rents. Knocks on the door. Guy comes to the door. He's got his drawers open. hole in front, and Jake's trying to ask this guy about rent, and he's looking at the guy going, bro, I'm just like, what do you do at that point? You got your free rent free, bro. On that very first property, Dax. That's why I'm amazed I'm talking to you, because that very first property, so many things happened to us in that first property. Our septic fields failed within 6 months of taking the property over. Unfortunately, we had a woman pass away in one of the units. We got sued for bed bugs by the person who owned the furniture. It was his furniture, and he sued us for bed bugs. All in the first. Don't ask me how or why exactly. We had multiple evictions on that first property. That's just the first property. But then what happens is, it's like having kids. It just becomes another one of those, another one of those, and another one of those, and you get stronger. And I always say to myself, I would rather be doing that business than be dealing with the pizzeria and having somebody complain about a $10 lasagna that I burned and they ate 90% of it and they didn't want to pay for it. I'd rather be dealing with $1,000 tenant paying. You see what I mean? At least I'm building wealth with the real estate. I got a customer that's bitching about something they finish eating, and I got to give them the free meal. You know what I'm saying? So it's all relative. So that's the way I actually was able to, justify why to stay in real estate. And thankfully, after that first deal, I didn't get scared away, and we kept going.
And you made money at the end of the day, right?
Yes.
All those complaints, all those heartaches, and you still made money.
Yes.
So that's the joys of multifamily.
Yeah.
Well, I like what you said about moving into a new market a minute ago. The strategy, if you're going to go into a new market, getting an anchor property that has a little bit more size to it, and then you can add maybe smaller properties to it. I think that's great strategy for whatever size properties you're getting. If you're getting larger properties, if you get a large property and then you can get some smaller ones and kind of build them together as a portfolio in that market, I think that's a great strategy. But also wanted to talk about, so MM6 is coming up, right? I wanted to give you a shot to talk about that a little bit.
MM6.
So we as Heritage have sponsored several of your events, and we've got the opportunity to meet you and know who you are, and we think you put on one of the best events. We really do. We think you do well. But
when it helps that Knoxville is an awesome town.
It does help that Knoxville's an awesome town, and Orlando, where you live, is Florida, so it's not bad place to visit. So but MM6, so it's coming up. Tell us about it, and tell people how they can be a part of it.
I'll tell you about MM1 back in 2017, because it's very appropriate to get in your first deal. Oh. It was 2017. We did it in Knoxville. We had 150 attendees. Probably 120 came for free. It was the scariest thing I ever did in my life. We had a stage. I actually had to speak on stage. I didn't invite the wife and kids. They didn't even come to the event. I sent them to Disney because I didn't want them to see me put on an event. And it was one of the scariest things I ever did. It's like buying your first deal. You just don't know what you don't know. Awkwardness is an indication of learning. And I felt awkward that whole journey, but I didn't quit. And then after MM1, somebody came up to me and said, I'm an event planner. You need an event planner? Like you said, Dax, you start meeting people. I'm like, sure, help me out. Let's do MM2. I had already committed to MM2 right after MM1, and MM2 was in 2018 in Nashville. That one, we had 350 people. MM3 was in 2019. We had about 500 people. Then MM4, then MM5 last year, which we had 1,200. And now we have Multifamily Mastery 6 once again at the Gaylord Palms. And, for anybody out there who wants to grow, wants to network, wants to get in a great room, wants to have fun, wants to meet people who are serious, because it's really hard to get into a room with people who are like-minded, who are trying to achieve the same damn thing you are. And it's really hard to do that nowadays, but there are events. So if you're serious about it, the biggest mistake that I made early on is I never went to these events. I always stayed in my cocoon. I didn't network. But then once I started going to events, all of a sudden you start seeing the same people. I think real estate in general, but multifamily, it's really a small knit group of people. And once you start meeting the right people, if you're looking to raise capital, if you're looking for vendors like Dax, if you are looking to network, if you have deals, if you're looking to, learn how to raise capital, build your brand, Chris Voss is going to be speaking about negotiation. One of the two things that I think everybody should learn how to do in their lives is learn how to negotiate properly and learn how to communicate. We're going to be talking about that at the event. It's about real estate, but these are life skills that we're never taught. So these are some of the things that we're going to be teaching at the event. And then obviously we have the whole Jake and Gino team there talking about buy right, manage right, finance right. Then we have a slew of vendors that we work with. So if you need somebody like cost segregation or a syndication attorney, they're all going to be at the event as well.
Yeah. No, I think it's awesome. And one of the things that I've always thought was good is it doesn't matter where you're at in life, whether, you have a career, and I'm going to speak specifically to the firefighters of New York, right? So you have a big audience of firefighters in New York that are a part of your team, right? And
Yes.
I just think that it doesn't matter where you're at in life. You have a place for them and you have a connection for them in your group that allows them to move to the next level, allows them to move to where they're headed in life, and allows them to move to where they want to go with their family. And so I've always thought that was really cool. And I've met some people from the group that will be lifelong friends. I promise. I talk to them often from the first event I was at, because I think you and I are like-minded. We're just here to help people, right? We want to be friends with everybody. We want to help people be better. Doesn't matter if they buy product from me or don't buy product from me. We're just trying to help people in general. And if we can help them, if we have a piece of advice for them and they want to take it and they want to contact us later, we're here for them. And
like
so
them more if they buy product.
we like them more if they buy product, but hey, that's beside. But it's just a family atmosphere, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing with your group and how you're reaching anybody. It's not just the ultra wealthy. You don't have to have tens of millions or hundreds of thousands. You can have 10, 20,000 and be able to be effective in multifamily, and you just teach them how to do it. So I want to thank you for some of the relationships that I've gained from your group. Also, I'm going to say this. I went through a very troubling time a year and a half ago with my brother passing, and you personally were really one of the people that reached out, sent something to me, and it was just a gesture of, hey, I know you're going through a tough time, but I'm here for you. And that's all I needed at that moment. I didn't need to talk to anybody. I didn't need to go through it, but you were there for me, and that meant something to me. It wasn't like I was just a vendor in your program. I was actually personally a person to you that you cared about. And so I think that's how you operate your group and your students in your group. And so kudos to you guys for what you're doing on that. But that meant a lot to me, and I think that's just how you operate. And so thank you for that. And anybody that's looking to start in this business, Jake and Gino are a great group to go to and be a part of. So I just wanted to throw that out there for you.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. Before you guys sign off, there's 4 big takeaways from this show I want to share with you. First one, you have Main Street Meats. You talked about that. That's really important in Chattanooga, okay? The second one,
food is important.
It is. The second one I wrote down is Chuck in a truck. You guys got to get that on you. That's got to be the Chuck in a truck. I never heard that. I love that. Don't work with Chuck in a truck. Work with Dax. That's what I got to say. I love that. Yeah. And the third one, you should toot your own horn, because it's difficult. It was difficult those last 18 months to actually get materials. And a lot of the students had problems with supply chain. So if you're out there helping people, and if you can cut down even a month's worth of time, that's $1,000 on average you're getting per unit, and you're making the residents happy. That's really important. And I think the last big takeaway is Gino's a quitter. I did quit. That's all.
There you go. I tried to convince your wife, but she didn't listen to me. So
thanks, brother. I wish you would listen.
Gino, thank you so much for being on today. I really do appreciate your time and taking time for us on being on the show. But thank you for what you're doing for the industry, and look forward to continuing our relationship in this industry moving forward.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for what you guys are doing too, because you guys can be sitting around working on business, but at the end of the day, it's a little selfish having a podcast. You get to meet a lot of really cool people, and you get to actually learn what's going on in the business. So it's a win-win situation. You're providing value, but you're also getting value back. And I think the listeners need to know that it's really a calling. This is a lot of hard work. You guys got to take time out of your day. You have to sit in front of a camera. You got to be uncomfortable. You got to think about what to say to the guests, and providing value is just one of the amazing benefits that you get from the podcast. So thanks again for having me on. I appreciate it.